Welcome back to part 2 of Developing Emotional Health. We're going to look in this section at how we resolve conflict with our teenagers and then how we help them to handle stress.
As we've said, with teenagers, there's a great deal of potential for conflict. We can easily be at loggerheads. They don't like a boundary we've set and think we're totally unreasonable.
Conflict arises because teenagers want more freedom than they yet have the maturity to handle. They want to explore and we want to protect.
We want to guide them. They want to be with their friends.
They're often tired, growing itself is tiring, and we're often worried. All of this means we're bound to clash occasionally.
There probably isn't a parent amongst us who hasn't struggled in their relationship with their teenager at some time or another. And there will certainly be times when our teenagers struggle with us. As one 18-year-old boy said, "If you think it's difficult to live with teenagers, spare a thought for those of us who have to live with our parents."
It's helpful to remember that this clash of wills is entirely normal and healthy, even though it's emotionally exhausting and very stretching. So, how are we going to resolve these conflicts with our teenagers so that we maintain a good relationship with them and give them a model for resolving conflict themselves now and in the future?
You know, I think the scary thing sometimes about being a parent is not that our children don't listen to us, but they really do, that they hear and watch every word. We can spend years telling them to be kind to others, but if they see us tear our husband or wife down in front of them, they'll remember how we actually lived. We can say the importance of saying sorry. Say sorry, but if they don't hear us say sorry. I once heard of a father say, "I've never apologized to my children for anything, nor would I." You could fear a man like that, but it's hard to respect him. But, you know, we mustn't go on a guilt trip over this. It's fine for kids to see us having rows and disturbances and bust-ups. That's family life. It's life, for goodness sake. But they must see how we deal with that. Forgiveness, grace. And, you know, this can become particularly difficult when parents are split up. And the temptation can be for us to bring down our husband or wife or partner and say negative things to our child, but I think that is always a bad thing. You know, we might not love each other, but our kids still love both their mother and father, and I think we are wise if we don't play that game. Actually, as far as possible, help them to increase respect for their mum, for their dad. They are watching us, aren't they? And learning.
We want to run through 6 principles that we found invaluable for resolving conflict.
First, identify the issue. So often, anxiety about one aspect of our teenagers' behaviour can cause us to be on at them about lots of things all of the time, which doesn't help with the issue or our relationship with them.
We need to identify the main issue that we're worried about, whether that's to do with schoolwork, alcohol, drugs, a relationship, the influence of their peer group or whatever. Or we may need to identify the issue that's upsetting them.
With teenagers, it's so easy to respond to the emotional heat rather than to address the issue. We can so quickly get caught up with the fact that our teenager isn't handling their emotions or their anger well, rather than identifying the real reason behind their anger. And by getting annoyed ourselves, we make the whole thing worse.
Here's a typical scenario. It's a midweek evening and we've asked our 15-year-old daughter to tidy up all her school books and papers that are littered all over the sofa in the sitting room and to take them upstairs to her room.
She responds with a sarcastic remark, storms through to the sofa, muttering under her breath, gathers them up in an angry slapdash fashion and looks like she's about to pick a fight with her younger brother.
We follow her in and tell her not to behave or to speak to us like that. She then rolls her eyes and we go into a lecture about how we never spoke to our parents like that, etc. A lecture we've given a number of times before. More words are exchanged. She's angry and we're making it worse.
Let's suppose the real reason she's angry is that 2 of her friends are out at the cinema and we haven't allowed her to go. We have a policy that she can't go out on a school night. What she's really feeling is, it's so unfair.
If we just lose our cool and send her to her room, our teenager ends up doubly angry. She's angry about her original issue, but she's also angry about the way that we've treated her.
Instead, if we say to her, "It sounds like you're really upset. What's up?" it might enable her to tell us what she's feeling and help us to identify the real reason behind her anger. Without us changing our policy about going out, she's likely to feel differently because she feels listened to and better understood.
To parents of teenagers, one of the things I think is really important is to be aware of what's going on in their lives. You can think you know things when you don't, and we had an incident with our oldest where she was very rude to us and reactive, and suddenly I was aware she had her exams and spoke to her, and it was funny, wasn't it? She broke down in tears. So from one extreme of really wanting to attack her and be angry with her, she was crying on our shoulders, which lent us to be able to say, you know, we're here to support you, we love you, we want to help you. So a top tip is to be aware of what's going on in their lives at any given time, because what's presented to you is only the tip of the iceberg.
The first principle for resolving conflict, then, is to identify the issue. The second principle is to find the best time and place to discuss the issue.
When we've identified an issue that we want to discuss with our teenager, we need to try to choose a time and a place where both they and we are most likely to stay calm, so we can have a discussion rather than a slanging match.
I think what's really important is to manage that explosion, and it may be that you say, "I'm wondering if you'd find it helpful to go and calm down for a minute." And not in a patronising way, and not in a sort of an aggressive way. Or you say, "Do you know something? This is a really difficult situation. I'm angry, you're angry. Should we have a break and go away and come back and talk about this in a minute when everyone's calmed down?" So you're not just saying to the teenager, "You're out of order, you're angry." And then allowing the teenager to calm down, which may mean they go into their bedroom, or they go outside, or they go for a walk, or they just sit down and watch some telly for a few minutes while they calm down. We also need to calm down as parents, and then come back to the conversation. And a really good time to come back to conversation is actually often at night time. And at night time, we're all releasing melatonin, which is a sleep chemical, and that dials us down. And so many parents say to me that they know that that's a good time to talk to their teenager, and actually to lots of children. But maybe then going into the bedroom, maybe if it is a few hours later, so many as parents, we ought to deal with the situation there and then. Now we must get it sorted, but actually maybe we need to give it an hour or so.
To choose the best time and place to talk through an issue with one of our teenagers, a great piece of advice we heard was to make an appointment with them and to ask them to give us the time. In this way, they felt we were treating them like an adult and were showing respect for them and for their views.
Sometimes, in order to ensure we had enough uninterrupted time, one of us would take the teenager in question out for a meal. The best places to go were the ones that had food they liked, but with the slowest service. We didn't choose a hamburger bar where we could be in and out in 15 minutes flat.
Sometimes, however, I, or Scylla and I, would use my study so that we could talk through the issue with them that was causing us concern privately. Or we might ask them to come for a walk. Walking side by side made the situation less intense and the discussion easier.
The third principle for resolving conflict is discuss the issue rather than attack our teenager.
It's easy to make assumptions and to jump to conclusions. More often than not, it takes time to understand the whole situation. We can get into the mindset that our teenagers are going to be difficult, rude, unreasonable, or that they're hiding something.
I did this with parties. I jumped to the conclusion that there was bound to be something suspect if they weren't forthcoming with any details. I had to learn to think carefully about the best time to talk to them, to use the right tone of voice, and above all, to listen carefully to their side of the story.
I remember Scylla and I getting together with a group of teenagers, and we asked them how difficult or easy they found it to resolve conflict with their parents. This is what they said. Parents seem too busy to listen.
They always see things their way.
They can't listen without taking control, and they often sound like they're against us, so it's hard to discuss anything with them.
I realised it was hard for our teenagers to discuss with me the issue of parties, as it sounded as though I was constantly attacking them.
We found it helpful when we'd made an appointment with one of them to plan carefully in advance what we were going to say, not least to help us to stick to the issue at hand. We tried to use I statements so they didn't feel attacked and go on the defensive. So we might say, I'm concerned about this or that, or I've been worried about whatever.
And rather than "you never tell us any details about parties," it was much more productive when I said something like, "I get worried and frustrated when I don't know the details."
It was then vital to give them the chance to speak and to listen to their point of view. Reflecting back what they said often helped to defuse the conflict.
So third, discuss rather than attack. A fourth principle for resolving conflict is to apologise if we know we've got it wrong.
If we've wrongly accused them in some way or totally misunderstood or mishandled a situation, we must be prepared to say sorry to them.
There was an occasion one morning when I had completely overreacted with Benj just as he was about to leave for school. He had a maddening way of appearing so casual and totally unconcerned about issues that I felt he should be taking much more seriously. Benj showed no response at all. He just walked out without a backward glance. I'm a rhino, he's a hedgehog. Moments later, I felt awful, so I wrote him a note apologising for having shouted at him. I stuck the note to the bottom of the stairs so he'd see it the moment he came home from school.
I was in the next door room and caught sight of Benj as he walked into the house from school, and he saw the note. I watched him read it again, fold it up, put it in his pocket, say, "Cool," before he walked upstairs.
Later, we talked about the issue that had caused my outburst much more calmly, and we both found it helpful.
I've become very good at apologising to our teenagers because I'm still learning. I tend to, the thing kind of seizes me and I don't listen properly. So I apologise a lot and then try and start again.
I'm often saying sorry to my girls. So I'm doing that a lot. And I'm aware that, in effect, you model something to your children and that you... I see them do to me what I do to them, and it's like, I'm sure that, sometimes you don't want to admit that that's what's gone on, but that is what's gone on. So we will talk about it. I will apologise to them. I think I'm normally aware, or try and be aware when I'm stressed, which is when I normally can operate like that.
When we get it wrong,
There's a lot of saying sorry.
Yeah, but that's okay. Because actually, you're modelling another thing there, which is, we don't always get it right in relationships, and this is how to mend a little fracture in a relationship. So on we go.
As well as modelling apologies, we must also model forgiveness when they've made mistakes and show them we can move on.
The fifth principle is discuss possible solutions. Where there's ongoing conflict around a particular issue, we need to look for possible solutions with our teenager.
It's so easy to get entrenched in our own position. We think there are only two possible solutions to the argument, theirs and ours. Theirs is wrong and ours is right.
But discussion will often show there's a third way, or several other possible solutions.
Often the discussions we had were around alcohol, smoking, schoolwork, where they were late at night and so on. However, I remember one issue that was more trivial but still frustrating and that caused conflict between us and our teenagers, was the piles of clothes littered around their rooms, clean and dirty, all mixed up together.
Rather than going on nagging them, I discussed the issue with them, and the best solution we came up with together was that they each had a laundry basket for their dirty clothes, and they were responsible for bringing it down and putting the clothes in the washing machine. I made it clear I wouldn't be coming into their rooms trying to sort through piles of clothes, and if their favourite T-shirt wasn't clean for a party, tough. That was their responsibility.
Admittedly, sometimes a few weeks went by until there was a crisis and we had to remind them of the agreement. However, this was a largely successful solution.
A sixth principle for resolving conflict is remain open-minded.
We need to be open to changing our mind, not about the non-negotiables, but other issues where we can be more flexible. It may be we see on reflection that we've been unreasonable.
I remember a conflict with one of our teenagers about a school holiday. Generally, I'd try to go to Scotland with our children to see our wider families. On one occasion, I'd already made elaborate plans when one of our sons, aged 11, announced that he wanted to go surfing in Cornwall with another family.
We were adamant that it was not going to be possible now because plans were fixed and it was much more important for him to see his grandparents and cousins. With a month to go, he'd bring up the subject at least every other day. For us, after the initial explanation, there was nothing more to discuss.
However, a week before we were due to set off for Scotland, we were leading a parenting course and we were talking about the importance of listening to our children. We came home to find a note on my pillow. On one side was written in big letters, "Mum, talk to Dad about surfing," with smaller writing in the corner surrounded by hearts saying, "Mum, do you want breakfast in bed, or any washing done, or ironing or shopping?"
On the other side was written some parenting points to go to sleep on. Does your son feel deprived? Can he fulfill his dreams? Will he never feel the power of the ocean? Will his hobby only be on his wall? His bedroom walls were covered with surfing posters. His new approach worked. The next day, realising how much the opportunity to surf meant to him, we had another discussion, and this time we decided we should let him go.
Sometimes we have to stand firm on what we've decided, but at other times, through discussing an issue with our teenager, we can make a compromise.
I think we have learned to be flexible. I think we've changed our mind on certain boundaries that we insisted upon early on. I can think of one example where we had the leaving school prom, where Emma wanted to stay out much later than we normally would have allowed.
Well, the whole night.
Yeah, it was the whole night. So what we did was we hit a compromise. I think we decided that we would pick you up at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m.
Right.
Your dad would pick you up. But we were really letting it go on that and just letting you take responsibility and make good choices.
Once we'd talked through an issue that was causing us concern, we had to make it clear to our teenager that the next step was in their hands. Our role was to talk to them about the consequences of their choices, but we couldn't control whether or not they followed our advice. That bit was up to them.
Conflict with a teenager won't always be resolved quickly or easily. There are some issues that can last for a number of years and involve strong emotions and different perspectives on life.
But we found that when we took the time to discuss issues we were concerned about and look for solutions with them, the process drew us and our teenager closer together.
Another important aspect for developing emotional health is how we handle stress. All of us have to learn to handle stress and pressures in life. Pressures of work or finding work, financial pressures, relationship pressures, and our 24/7 culture with all its demands. Parents often put extra pressure on themselves, thinking they have to be a perfect parent.
The media gives parents the impression that there are perfect ways of parenting and right, quote, techniques to rear perfect children. This has only served to make a lot of us parents feel inadequate, as if we're wanting as parents. And yet the reality is parenting is something we're doing without an instruction booklet. It's never going to be perfect. It's always going to be messy, and our children will always turn around and have complaints about the way that we were parented. That's normal, and that's life. And what we have to learn to do is to accept that parenting isn't perfect, it isn't an organized thing, and you can't necessarily prepare for it in a perfect way. And feel relaxed with that instead of feeling anxious about it, which is what we have been feeling.
As we've said, our teenagers too face many pressures today. Obviously, we want our children's lives to be happy and carefree. However, some degree of stress is an inevitable part of life. We can't make our children's lives totally stress-free. That's unrealistic.
But if the challenges become overwhelming or our children feel unsupported, this can lead to a state of constant anxiety and unhealthy stress. We want to look at 4 practical ways to help our teenagers handle stress. First, we can help them learn a balance of success and failure.
We need to help our children to know that mistakes and failures are a part of life, and that through them we learn, we grow, we can recover. That means not being afraid to talk about our own mistakes.
Children are hypersensitive to our expectations. We have to keep reminding them all we expect is that they will do their best and that we love them unconditionally. It's very powerful to say to a teenager, "I love you because I love you." especially at a moment when they feel like a failure, vulnerable, or under pressure to perform.
One of the ways in which we've tried to help our teenagers recognise that they're doing really well is when they got their school report at the end. Well, one of them tended to do from time to time was they pick out the negative every now and then, just a little constructive comment that was meant, and they picked that out. So I went and photocopied it, enlarged it, and enlarged it, and enlarged it, and enlarged it. So the writing was sort of, font size 100, and then cut out all the positive bits, and just cut and paste all the positive things, which it was loads, and just sort of stuck it together on sellotape, and then hung it from the ceiling above their bed, so they couldn't possibly fail to see it. And there was just all these comments that others had made, praising their achievements in a whole range of issues, with all the other bits cut away.
For Rebecca, hers is that because the brother does very well academically, so the pressure is automatically on her to perform as well. So, but we have always assured her that, do your best and we will love you whatever the results.
When I was young, I felt under tremendous pressure to succeed, and looking back, I realised my siblings did too. My father was very determined to give us the best education he could afford because he hadn't been able to have that himself, and he was very, very keen for us to do well academically, and it was best of intentions, but it translated into huge pressure to succeed, and I think it can be very damaging, and I think I got off relatively lightly, but I know my sister in particular felt very damaged by that. So I've always been conscious of that. And one thing I do repeatedly say to the boys when it seems appropriate is we're not concerned about how well they do as long as they make the effort at school, that we love them for who they are. I think those sorts of things need to be said again and again, so I try to do that.
A second way to help our teenagers handle stress is to avoid comparing a child with their siblings or peers. If we say something like, "Why is it that you always look so much more untidy than the others?" it's easy for them to think that we find their brother or sister easier or more successful than they are. And if we only ever commend one teenager, the others can feel put down.
If they're not so obviously gifted, we'll need to find other characteristics to praise, such as how helpful they are, or their sense of humour, or the way they show kindness to a friend.
They may be very different to the teenager we envisaged having. Perhaps they're artistic rather than interested in sport, or more practical than academic, in which case we'll need to encourage them to be themselves and to support them in pursuing their own passions. When they feel appreciated and valued for who they are, they'll handle stress in an entirely different way.
I think parents themselves feel under pressure for their children to be something possibly. We live in a society again where everyone's constantly looking at us as we're bringing our children up. I think parents themselves feel under pressure, and then they can put that pressure on their teenagers definitely to be the brightest, the best, the most wonderful teenager in their behaviour, possibly in their exam results, in just who they are generally. And I think definitely parents can do that, and parents need to stand back and allow their children to be the individuals that they are, in all the ways that they are, whether that's their exam results or their behaviour or the way they dress, the way they are, the way they be, and not try and make their child to be somebody they're not.
Third, create enough space for relaxation and chilling. Too many extracurricular clubs and activities can add more pressure, and we may need to help them cut down. They need to have time to do things just for relaxation, not always to learn and improve.
One teenage boy, whose father was a very good sportsman, used to play tennis with his dad. His father always wanted to coach him to a higher standard, while he just wanted to have fun. This same father put a lot of pressure on him to achieve, which led to an eating disorder and to depression.
Teenagers need lots of time just to hang out and chill. Long meal times at the weekend, playing games together, and seeing us relaxing all help to reduce stress levels. When the holidays come, they might just need to have a lie-in or loll around the house in their pyjamas.
I think with both our teenage boys, we're aware that school places big demands upon them, and we're encouraging them to work hard and do the best they can. But alongside that, it's so important as well that you recognise their need just to relax and chill out, and make sure that there are times when they can just go out, and if for our boys it's often going out and playing a game of football, or it could be just watching a DVD. Really encouraging that, because we don't want to give them the impression that we just want them to work the whole time.
We found it really important that we have times where the children can just chill out, and so we make it a priority to go to our summer house where we don't have internet and we don't have television, and we just have to play games and talk to each other, and it's a chance for them just to relax and be at peace.
I grew up in an environment where probably relaxing was not something I did so much at home, so I was really keen for my children and my girls to be able to literally just chill out and not feel under pressure all the time. And so we created this room, which is really their room, and they hang out there, and I'm quite happy if they're in their pyjamas for the day, and they don't do that every day, but the time they do it, I'm quite happy with that.
Fourth, we need to talk to them about their worries. Some teenagers tell us exactly what they're worried about, whereas with others it's more difficult and it will take time to draw it out of them. Creating natural opportunities to talk is a part of healthy family life.
This will often be when we have one-to-one time with them. When we know what it is they're anxious about, we can find ways to help them. So if they're struggling with working for exams, we could help them with a revision timetable.
Or if they're struggling with a relationship at school, we can talk it through with them. I remember us talking through with our children a number of times how they could handle and still stick by a friend who was going through a really annoying stage.
It's so important our teenagers are able to voice negative feelings, whether it's anger, as we've talked about, or anxiety, fear, insecurity, or even a sense of failure.
But also, there's a general thought that it's good for us to get in touch with our emotions and for our children to do so until they get in touch with the ones that we don't want to have to face. The nasty ones like anger, resentments, sadness, and so on. We'd rather people get in touch with nice-tasting emotions, but the human condition is a messy business, and we have to accept that some of the emotions our children are going to express are not going to be nice ones, and they're going to be troubling ones. But it is important that they do learn and feel able to express those emotions in the right way at the right time, especially with you, their parents who love them.
Well, it's not always easy to get your teenager to talk to you about their worries, but I found that what we do is we've just really worked at listening to them. We've really worked at opening these communication, channels of communication. Karen especially has been very good at that.
I think what I've found is really important is when you notice and you see the signs that your teenager's worrying is not to press, and if they say no, don't keep going on and saying, what is it, and keep pushing, because you're just pushing them further away. What I've found helpful is to stand back and just look for if there's any signs of a particular area that I can see they're worried about, and then create an opportunity, maybe sit down and have a coffee with them, or perhaps go and watch a game of something with them, and actually just generally start a conversation, but then actually say, how are things at school? And just give them that opportunity to talk about school, if that's the sign that you've picked up is a problem. And as Paula said, just to keep the communication open generally, just to keep affirming love, and just to look for the little signs and make every opportunity for them to talk to you, and for them to know that actually it's safe, that you're not going to judge or get angry, but just make them feel really safe that they can talk to you and that you can sort things out with them. I think that's helpful.
Yes, I sometimes think that teenagers take more time than younger children. That it is more skill you have to learn. You have to be very skillful.
Yes, and they often want to work it out for themselves. And I think often our role as parents of teenagers is to help them work it out and solve it for themselves, and that we're there to support them in that. And that was a transition from having very young children. Yeah.
Through keeping the channels of communication open, we can help our teenagers to learn to express and handle their emotions well. We can model to them not to be fearful of difficult and messy emotions.
We can encourage them to express, not suppress, things they're struggling with. Keeping the channels of communication open, especially through listening, is one of the greatest gifts we can give to our teenagers. In the parenting book, we've put separate chapters on handling anger and managing stress, and more detailed information on eating disorders and depression.
We're going to close this session with a prayer.
Lord, thank you that you are the God of love and the Prince of Peace. Thank you that you show us the way to resolve conflict and to build strong relationships in our family. We pray that you would help us to grow in our relationship with our children. May we learn to handle our anger and our stress in a healthy way and equip our teenagers to do the same. And where a relationship between a parent and a teenager has become strained, please bring your encouragement and hope for the future. Draw them closer again, we pray. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Next session, we're going to be looking at how we help our teenagers make good choices with the big issues they're facing.
We'd like you now to turn to the questions for discussion in your manuals. Goodbye.
Goodbye.